Hello, mathematicians. This is Dr. Yates sending a math lesson your way. You are going to have young ladies and gentlemen in your class that maybe do not perceive themselves as mathematicians. And so I'm starting today's lesson with just a fun picture because the first slide saying chapter 1 was kind of boring. So these are my two daughters, and this is taken at a waterfall in Tennessee. And my children aren't particularly fond of math, and you're going to have many such students. And so today, as we cover some basic principles from your textbook to kind of help guide you through chapter 1, I would just like for you to keep your future students in focus. I want you to think about these children that maybe grow up and they think counting is so cool and adding 2 plus 2 is really cool. And then they get to some harder math concepts and they change their mind. And so we're going to talk about principles of learning mathematics. And one of the things that I would like to start off with is just telling you that your students are going to need computational skills. And it might not be fun for you to teach adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing, but it is necessary. And it's even necessary for you to tell your boys and girls to start memorizing those basic facts. So that is one very important thing that your students are going to need, and that is stressed in chapter 1. You're also going to need to give your students the ability to think and reason mathematically, and that only comes with practice. And so I want you to think about not just computational skills, but also thinking and reasoning mathematically. There is a wonderful video that I would like for you to watch, and so I'm going to include that in the email where I send your directions for today. And you will see this young lady that's pictured here as she models some strategies for you. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what to focus on as you're going through chapter 1 so that it doesn't get too boring and so that you just don't give up and ignore the chapter. One of the things that I want to draw your attention to are the 5 content standards. And I know that already sounds boring, but I just want you to think of it this way. If your teacher, where you are interning, says, I want you to pick a standard from one of our 5 content areas, I want you to know what she means. And you don't have to have these memorized, but you do need to be able to recognize them. And so everything that you're teaching in math is either going to be about numbers and operations, or algebra, or geometry, or measurement, or data analysis and probability. And so each one of those is described in your text on page 4. And I want you to think about your content standards. You don't necessarily have an assignment that you have to do. If we were in class, we would kind of tackle a little activity with that. But I just want you to know that everything that you're teaching in math is going to come from one of these 5 content areas or one of these standards. And then your chapter goes on, just to make it a little bit more confusing. Here we've talked about the 5 content standards, or the 5 areas that you're going to be teaching, but your book talks next about the 5 process standards. Well, process standards are just talking about doing mathematics. And if you look at table 1.1 in your textbook, you'll have a better understanding. And so when we are teaching our boys and girls, we want them actually doing math. And so I was reminded of a lesson that this young lady taught in my class last semester, and she dressed up as a pirate teacher, and she was teaching her boys and girls to do mathematics, and they had a real purpose because she asked them to be involved in problem solving so that they could find the treasure. And as they were explaining and elaborating, they were providing their reasoning. They were really thinking things through. And then she would ask them to prove their answer. Also, as the students were talking with the pirate teacher, they were involved in communication. And so when our boys and girls are talking about math, they're learning. And they were making connections. What they were doing connected to the real world because it helped them find the treasure. It helped them solve problems. And they were also using representation. And we do that a lot when we do with manipulatives. Instead of just saying 2 times 8 is 16. I'm going to show you 2 rows of 8 objects in each row. And I'm going to prove to you through my representation that 2 times 8 is 16. So when you are working through Chapter 1, you're going to review the 5 process standards, the 5 things that we want our students doing in math class. Then we have kind of a funny question. What should guide the mathematical targets I teach? One of the things that we notice with our teachers, not just our first year teachers, but certainly it's more stressful for them, but all of our teachers are just overwhelmed. There are so many things, or there are so many things that I need to teach. So we look at what should guide us as we're picking our lessons and as we're deciding what to focus on. Well, our answer is the Common Core State Standards. You are giving a directive of what you need to teach. And so if you look at table 1.2, you're going to see some critical areas that we need to focus on in early childhood and in the elementary years. And we're also going to focus on our standards for mathematical practice. And those are those processes and proficiencies that are founded on the National Council for Teaching Mathematics process standards. And so that is in table 1.1. There's just so many tables in chapter 1 and so many lists of kind of generic type topics that I really wanted to point your attention out. Don't you think it's pretty important that you should know what's guiding your mathematical teaching? I do. And so I thought back to a lesson that was taught by these two gentlemen as they were team teaching. And it looks here, they've probably got if you give a mouse a cookie, kind of looks like the story that they have here. And they are teaching to Common Core standards, but yet their lesson was fun. And I just wanted to throw a little reminder out to you as you're going through chapter 1. I don't want it to take all the joy away from teaching. We're focusing on standards, yes. Our list of standards is not very exciting. It's your job to use your God-given creativity to make those standards come alive and to make it interesting for your students. Now, as we teach math, we have to consider the fact that our math classrooms have changed a little bit from maybe how I was taught and maybe even how you were taught. And so there's a section in chapter 1 that discusses shifts in the classroom environment. We used to have a classroom being this group of individuals, but now we see it as a mathematical community. We used to see the teacher as the sole authority for having the answers, but now we're going to use our logic and our problem solving, and we're going to try to provide evidence to verify our answers in math. We used to memorize procedures, and we still do need some memorization going on in the math classroom, but now we're saying, hey, we're making a movement towards more mathematical reasoning. Can you talk about your answer? Would you show me how you figured that out? Would you help my brain to reason through this problem in that way? And so mathematical reasoning is where we're going, and we want to be sure that we're allowing our boys and girls to talk as they're reasoning things out. We used to have an emphasis on the mechanics. Oh, let's just find the right answer. Just do it this way. Follow this list of steps that I'm giving you. But now we're asking our students to conjecture and to invent and to problem solve. It's kind of exciting. We used to treat mathematics as a body of just isolated concepts. This is math class. But now we want to connect math and the ideas we're learning in math, we want to apply it to the real world. And so as you are developing your lesson plans and as you're teaching your lessons, I want to see these things in the classroom environment that you're setting up as you share with us. So we all face the challenge of teaching standard-based mathematics. And I want you to pick your standard and I want you to teach it, but I want you as the teacher to make it exciting. And you can see my class here, we were working on a measurement standard, and we brought in the literature book about measuring Penny, which is the name of the dog. I don't know if you look closely in the book, you can see the dogs, but we actually brought in a dog to our classroom, and we measured her with our rulers, and we recorded the information. And so we as educators can model thinking as mathematicians, and we can make it fun. And we need to focus on how a person goes about learning mathematics. How can I learn how to measure? Because I want to measure my dog. This semester, I do want to stress that sometimes you have to devote more time to teaching a concept and teaching it deeply, really making sure your students are learning and understanding. If you look at a big list of things that you have to teach, you might just skim over the surface. And sometimes we do that. We do that in college. I do that in a couple of my courses. I just skim over the surface of a lot of things. But sometimes we need to devote more time to a concept, and we really need to focus on deep learning. And this is discussed on page 8 of your textbook, and I hope that you take some time to read about deep learning. And we do that through a student-centered approach. We've got to be sure that our students are getting to that deep level of understanding, and we're really watching how they think and how they process and how they learn math. So, in order to become a teacher of mathematics, there's a few things that you're going to need. And if you look at pages 9 and 10, it kind of outlines these things. You need a knowledge of mathematics. So I'm going to be sure that you understand some of your basic ideas in math. And college students, that's one reason why you have to pass the GKT and the subject area exam. We don't want to send you out there if you don't have knowledge of mathematics. And if you know there's something that you're struggling with, if you will be brave and bold enough to ask me, I would like to help you understand that. I certainly do not mind giving you a little boost of confidence in a certain area of math. And so be sure that you let me know, Dr. Yates, I never have understood this. Maybe you're a little bit embarrassed about it or you're a little bit unsure, but let's just nip that right in the bud and take care of that. Let me help you in any area that you don't feel confident, that you really know your stuff. A couple of you might be saying, if it comes to math, I don't know my stuff in any of the areas. But let's work on that. Let's become better together. To be a teacher of mathematics, you definitely need to be persistent. Sometimes we don't get things the first time around, and we've got to try again. When I fall flat on my face, I'm going to pick myself back up and be persistent. Paul talks to us about having endurance and keeping on when things get difficult. And so as a teacher of mathematics, you need persistence, and that's a biblical character trait. So let's work on that together this semester. You'll also need a positive attitude. Oh, I love that. So as you're reading through chapter 1, it talks about that positive attitude, that I can do attitude, and teach that to your boys and girls as well. And for those of you that are seniors that are joining me in the book club on a growth mindset, you'll find out just how important this is. And it's also important that you stress with your boys and girls the effort is more important than their intellectual level. If you can keep a positive attitude, encourage those boys and girls who might be struggling, that they just can apply more effort and we will get there together. As a math teacher, you also need to be ready to change. There are going to be things that you're going to change as far as state standards change, the way that we teach things change. You might have to change the way that you're teaching something because a student grasps it one way, and you need to be quick and ready to present it in yet another way. And you also need to have a reflective disposition and think back after you teach a lesson. And at the end of the 5E lesson plan format, you'll notice a little section where you can reflect and what did I do well? What do I need to improve on? What did the boys and girls really get? What could I do to help them understand this concept better? So I thank you for listening, and I hope that this will speed you on your journey as you go through and hit the highlights of Chapter 1. Have a good evening.